She froze when the order came down. Not because she didn't expect it, but because, for the first time, every eye in the room turned to her. The walls hummed with fluorescent light. The air smelled faintly of coffee, sweat, and maps handled too many times. And in that silence, she knew what most of them were thinking. She can't handle it. The weight of that unspoken verdict pressed against her ribs, the way body armor never could. She straightened in her chair, her fingers locked together so tightly her knuckles whitened. But she didn't speak. Not yet. "Lieutenant Vasquez will take point," the commander said flatly, almost daring anyone to object. A shift in the air, boots scuffed against the floor, a stifled cough, the subtle exhale of men who'd already decided this was a mistake. She kept her eyes forward, not meeting theirs, not giving them that satisfaction. Because she had a reason they didn't know, something she hadn't told them, not yet. Outside, the base smelled of rain on tarmac and diesel from generators. The helicopters stood in line like restless beasts, rotors ticking slowly in the cool night breeze. She adjusted her rifle strap, the weight familiar, grounding. Her hand brushed the small patch sewn inside her vest. No one else knew it was there. A scrap of cloth, faded, frayed at the edges. The only thing she carried from her brother's last deployment. He never came home. That was the part they didn't see. The reason she stayed silent when they questioned her, because she wasn't here to prove them wrong. She was here to finish what he started. "Ma'am," one of the younger soldiers muttered as he fell into line beside her. His voice was low, almost nervous. "If you don't mind me asking, why'd they pick you?" He regretted the question the second it left his mouth. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, like he wanted to take it back. She thought about brushing him off, keeping the distance, but something in his tone wasn't mockery, it was curiosity, maybe even fear. So she gave him the only answer that mattered. "Because I won't quit." The words came out softer than she expected, not defiant, not angry, just true. He nodded once, his face unreadable. Then he adjusted his pack and said nothing more. The helicopter's roar swallowed every thought. Blades cutting the air into a deafening rhythm, headsets crackling with clipped voices. She sat near the open hatch, cold air tearing at her face, eyes fixed on the darkness below. The city stretched out in broken lights, streets half dead, buildings like fractured teeth against the horizon. Her pulse stayed steady. She trained herself for that. But deep down, beneath the armor, the training, the mission orders, there was a tremor she couldn't silence. Because this was no ordinary recon. She glanced down at the folded paper tucked into her vest pocket. Not official maps, not orders, a different sketch, hand-drawn, the last thing her brother had left her, circles marked with initials only the two of them understood. And tonight, by some cruel twist, the mission target overlapped with one of those circles. Coincidence? Maybe, but she didn't believe in coincidences anymore. 2 minutes, the crew chief shouted. She tightened her grip on her weapon, checked her gear again, rituals that gave her mind something to hold. The others moved through their own motions, but she could feel it, eyes flicking toward her, waiting to see hesitation, waiting to confirm their doubts. She gave them nothing. The helicopter dipped, shuddered, then steadied as it hovered just above the drop zone. Shadows flickered across the ruined buildings below. "Go, go, go." Boots hit dirt, shouts in the dark, a brief scatter of chaos before formation snapped into place. She landed harder than she meant to, knees jolting but kept moving. Breath fogged in the night air. The city smelled of smoke, rust, something metallic she couldn't place. "Eyes open," she whispered into comms. Her voice came calm, almost detached. "We're not alone down here." And she was right, she could feel it. The streets swallowed sound, muffling every step. The silence felt wrong, not the natural quiet of an abandoned district, but something expectant. Her heart ticked faster. She scanned windows, doorways, alleys. Her mind replayed training drills, but instinct screamed louder. Then movement, a flicker, a shape ducking just out of sight. Contact, someone hissed. Fingers tightened on triggers, breath caught in lungs. But she raised her hand, signaling hold. Not yet. Her eyes narrowed because something about that movement didn't fit. It wasn't an ambush. It wasn't hostile. It was smaller. She motioned forward alone, ignoring the muttered protests in her earpiece. Her boots crunched glass as she stepped into the narrow street. And there, crouched against the wall, eyes wide in terror. A child. Dust in her hair, bare feet, hands shaking as she clutched a crumpled photograph to her chest. The silence broke, voices in her comms surged. "What are you doing? We need to move. This is a trap, ma'am." Maybe it was, but she didn't lower her weapon. She lowered her voice. "It's okay," she whispered, more to herself than to the girl. "It's okay." Behind her, boots shifted impatiently. The mission clock ticked. Every second stretched like wire pulled too tight. But in the girl's eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected. Not just fear, recognition. The child lifted the photograph, just enough for moonlight to catch its edges. Her breath stopped, because the face staring back from that torn picture was her brother. Why did the girl have that photo? The question thundered through Elena Vasquez's mind, louder than the gunmetal silence pressing against her earpiece. She stared at the photograph, at the boyish grin frozen in time, at the familiar face she hadn't allowed herself to dream about for years. Her brother. It made no sense. He had died thousands of miles away. At least that's what she'd been told. The child clutched the picture tighter, her knuckles pale in the moonlight. Wide eyes darted between Elena and the soldiers behind her. Mistrust, terror, something unspoken, but also something else. A thread she couldn't name. "Ma'am, we need to move." Sergeant Harris's voice broke through, low and urgent. He was the kind of man who didn't ask twice. "We've already lost 3 minutes." Elena's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to kneel, to reach out, to ask the girl where she found that photograph. But another instinct, the one drilled into her through years of training, screamed just as loudly. "Stay on mission." She forced her jaw tight, her weapon still low but ready. Her heart thundered so hard she swore the others could hear it. "Secure the perimeter," she ordered finally, voice level. "Now." The squad scattered reluctantly, muttering curses under their breath. She caught fragments through the comms. "Waste of time. Damn babysitting. She'll get us all killed." She let it slide. Their doubt wasn't new. What was new was the paper in the girl's trembling hands. Elena crouched slowly, the cold cement seeping through her knee pads. She softened her tone, though the words caught like glass in her throat. "Where did you get that?" The girl didn't answer. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes flicked toward a broken building behind her, then back again, quick as a sparrow. "Elena," Harris again, this time harsher, "we don't have the luxury." She ignored him. "Is he here?" she asked softly. Her throat constricted on the last word. She hated herself for even asking. The child's eyes shimmered, a single tear cutting through the dirt on her cheek. And then, fingers barely moving, she pointed toward the building. Elena's pulse spiked. They breached fast, disciplined. Doors kicked open, muzzles sweeping every corner. Dust rained from ceilings as boots thudded up narrow stairwells. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and rust. Shadows warped across walls riddled with holes. Second floor clear. Third floor empty. But the fourth. A sound, a cough. Rough human not even trying to hide. Weapons rose as the team fanned out. Harris signaled for silence, then advanced toward the sound. Elena followed, each step heavier than the last. Her skin prickled as though the building itself were watching. And then they saw him. He was slumped against the far wall, legs stretched stiff, clothes tattered and stained with dirt. A beard masked half his face. His eyes were shut tight, chest heaving shallow, ragged breaths. But it wasn't just any man. It was him. Her brother. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Her throat locked, her body frozen, as if her bones refused to believe what her eyes delivered. He was alive. "Holy shit," one of the privates muttered, his rifle lowered instinctively. That's an American uniform." But Harris was less forgiving. He stepped forward, weapon steady. "Identify yourself." The man stirred, eyelids fluttering open. Eyes bloodshot, glassy, but unmistakably the same Hazel she remembered. "Elena," his voice rasped, dry as broken glass. The room tilted. Her helmet felt too heavy. She wanted to collapse, to weep, to scream. But all she did was step closer, her lips trembling. "It's me," she whispered. "It's me." Behind her, the squad exchanged looks. Confusion, skepticism, fear. Because men don't come back from the dead. He tried to sit up, but his body betrayed him. Harris caught his shoulder roughly, pinning him back down. "Hold it," Harris barked. "We don't know who the hell this is. Could be bait, could be compromised." Elena's eyes snapped to him, sharp as blades. "That's my brother." The words echoed too loudly, even in her own ears. They weren't part of the mission. They weren't supposed to exist, but they were true. The squad froze. Some looked away. Others let disbelief flicker openly across their faces. Harris scowled. "Your brother died 3 years ago, Vasquez." Her jaw tightened. "So explain this." The man, her brother, groaned, lifting one trembling hand. His fingers brushed against the inside pocket of his ragged vest. With effort, he pulled free a folded scrap of paper. He dropped it into her hand before slipping into a coughing fit. Elena unfolded it. Not orders, not intel, another map. Marked with the same circles as hers. Her breath stuttered. The paper shook in her hand. Because the markings weren't random, they were linked like puzzle pieces. And together they pointed to something bigger, something unfinished. But before she could speak, the sound hit. Gunfire. Sharp, sudden, outside. The squad dropped instantly, instincts firing. Voices surged in comms. "We're hit. Contact north side." Harris cursed, dragging Elena's brother toward cover. "Vasquez with me." She snapped her rifle up, adrenaline slicing through grief. Boots thundered, walls shook. The child screamed somewhere below. The building became a cage of echoes. She returned fire, muzzle flashing in bursts. Shadows darted across windows, figures firing from alleys. The air reeked of cordite and plaster dust. Through it all, she caught glimpses of the girl, huddled under a broken table, hands over her ears, rocking. Her gut twisted. Orders screamed in her headset. "Hold position. We can't extract yet. Goddamn ambush." But Elena's mind split, half with her rifle, half with the child, and deep underneath one thought burned like acid. They came here for intel. They came here for targets. But what they found was something far messier. Family. And now family was under fire. "Cover me," she yelled, breaking from position. Harris swore in her ear, but bullets followed her instead of words. She dove across debris, sliding hard on one knee, scooping the girl into her arms. The child clung tight, small fingers digging into the fabric of Elena's vest. "Stay down," Elena whispered hoarsely. The girl buried her face against her neck. She pulled them both behind a collapsed wall, just as another volley shattered glass where they'd been. Harris's voice cut through static. "You're out of line, Vasquez." She clenched her teeth. "Then pull me back in later." Because right now, there was no later. There was only this, protecting the only two souls in this ruin who tied her past to her present. The firefight dragged on, bursts, silence, shouts, echoes. Through the chaos, Elena noticed something. The attackers weren't pressing. They fired heavy, scattered volleys, but no charge, no close quarters push. It wasn't to kill. It was to pin them. She realized it a second too late. An explosion tore through the far side of the building. The world lurched, ears ringing, dust raining like ash. Soldiers cried out, some thrown to the floor. A breach. They were coming inside. Elena pressed the child tighter, her mind snapping to calculation. Escape routes, angles, survival. But the more she counted, the more the numbers came up short. And then her brother's hand, weak, trembling, gripping her sleeve. "Elena," his voice cracked, barely there. "You can't stay." She stared at him, throat burning. "I'm not leaving you." His eyes locked onto hers, wild with desperation. "You don't understand, they're here because of me." Her breath caught, the air vanished from her lungs. "What are you talking about?" But before he could answer, the enemy crashed through the smoke. The blast still echoed in her skull when the first figure burst through the breach. Muzzle flash lit his face for a split second, eyes hidden under a scarf, movements precise, trained. Not a looter, not a stray militia. These were professionals. "Down!" Harris roared, dragging a private against the floor just as bullets shredded the wall above them. Elena fired back, controlled bursts, teeth clenched. The child clung to her vest like a shadow, silent now, too terrified even to cry. Her brother lay slumped against rubble, coughing blood, eyes wild as though fighting both pain and time. His voice cracked through the chaos. "They're here for me." The words cut through her like shrapnel. "Not us. Not the mission. Me." She ducked behind cover, her breathing ragged, ears ringing. Harris slid in beside her, his jaw clenched, helmet cracked along one side. "You knew something," he hissed over the comms, his voice a blade. "Didn't you? You knew this op was dirty." "I didn't," she snapped back, firing 2 rounds without looking. The weight of the girl pressed against her chest, grounding her, burning her. "Then why the hell is there a ghost soldier in here calling you sister?" Elena's throat closed. She had no answer that wouldn't unravel everything. "Later," she growled. "We survive now, talk later." But Harris's glare told her he wasn't letting this go. The squad fought like a cornered pack. Controlled fire, angles covered, every movement drilled by months of survival. Yet the enemy pressed harder, coordinated, working in pairs, hurting them rather than crushing them. Elena saw it. Harris didn't, the others didn't, but she saw it. They weren't trying to kill the squad. They were closing in on her brother. "Why?" Her stomach turned. A thought formed, sharp and poisonous. What if he wasn't a victim? What if he was the reason? Her brother coughed, spitting blood, his hand reaching weakly for her arm. She leaned closer, bullets cracking overhead. "Elena, I broke away months ago." His words came in gasps. "They didn't kill me, they used me, and now they want me back." Her blood iced over. "Used?" The circles on the maps, the missing years, the photograph in the girl's hands. She wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but the firefight allowed no time. The wall behind them shook again, another breach attempt. "Fall back," Harris bellowed. They pulled tighter into the building's core, backs to each other, muzzle flashes strobing the dust-choked air. Every shot rang like a hammer inside her chest. Elena kept her body around the child, shielding her from shards of glass and flying brick, but her eyes stayed locked on her brother. He wasn't the same man who left years ago. The war had carved lines in his face she didn't recognize. His eyes burned with something more than survival. Guilt. Secrets. He had been a soldier. Now what was he? And why, after all this time, did fate throw them into the same ruin on the same night? "Command, this is Alpha One," Harris barked into comms, voice hoarse. "We are under heavy assault, pinned inside a 4-story structure. Multiple casualties, possible high-value target on site. Requesting immediate air support, over." "Static." The line hissed back nothing but silence. Harris cursed, slamming the radio against his vest. "They're jamming us." Elena's gut twisted tighter. Enemy tactics, professional-grade equipment, precision ambushes. This wasn't random militia. Whoever they were bigger than the mission brief suggested. She glanced at her brother again. His head slumped, but his lips moved faintly, shaping words she almost didn't catch. "They'll never let me go." For one suspended moment, everything around her slowed. The gunfire became distant, the squads shouting muffled, even the girls shaking seemed to fade. Her mind reached back years, to a kitchen table in a tiny house, to her brother laughing as he showed her how to balance a rifle, telling her courage wasn't about noise, it was about stillness. And then she remembered the phone call, the one that told her he was gone, how she punched the wall until her knuckles bled, swearing she would never believe it unless she saw a body. Now she saw a body, but it was breathing, speaking. Entangled in a war she didn't understand. The firefight intensified. Grenades shook the building. Dust turned the air into a suffocating fog. The squad's ammo counts dropped into single digits. "Elena," Harris barked. "Decision time, we can't hold this." She glanced at the girl, at her brother, at the squad who no longer trusted her. A decision. The mission said fall back, regroup, extract. But the mission didn't account for this. Her brother's map, her brother's past. The girl's photograph. She realized then the enemy wasn't here to erase. They were here to reclaim, to pull him back into their shadow. And if they succeeded, everything he knew would be turned against her own people. She knelt beside him, pressing her forehead briefly against his. His skin burned with fever, sweat cold and slick. "Tell me the truth," she whispered fiercely. "Everything." His eyes flickered open, hazy but desperate. "They made me plan. Targets, routes, cells, I gave them pieces. Enough to hurt, enough to kill, but not everything, never everything. I kept something back." "What?" she demanded. Before he could answer, the wall caved under another blast. Shouts surged closer. Shadows stormed the stairwell. The time for answers was gone. Harris grabbed her shoulder, dragging her half upright. His eyes burned through his visor. "We can't carry him and fight. We'll lose everyone." Elena's chest heaved. The girl pressed her face tighter into her neck. Her brother's eyes begged her, though he didn't speak. Harris's voice dropped, harsh and final. "You need to choose. Duty or blood." The firefight swallowed the room whole, ripping through walls, rattling bones. She tightened her grip on her weapon, her arm around the child, her eyes locked on her brother. And in that crucible of noise and fire, Elena Vasquez understood something that shattered her. No matter what choice she made, history would remember her not for victory, but for the silence she carried inside. She raised her weapon and prepared to decide. The walls shook as another blast ripped through the building. Dust rained like ash, stinging her eyes, coating her tongue with grit. Every sound blurred into one: gunfire, shouting, the girl's ragged breathing against her neck. But Harris's voice cut through it all, a blade. "Choose Vasquez, him or the mission." Her stomach turned to stone. The squad crouched behind splintered beams and broken concrete, faces smeared with sweat and soot. Eyes flicked toward her, accusing, desperate, waiting. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her brother's hand trembled against hers, cold despite the fever burning through him. His lips moved, too soft for the others to hear. "Don't let them take me." The plea hollowed her out. She remembered the day she enlisted. The stares, the whispers, the certainty in their voices that she wouldn't last a month. Too small, too stubborn, too fragile. She buried all of it under steel and silence, proving herself one mission at a time. Every bruise, every scar, every sleepless night was a stone in the wall she built around her heart. But now that wall was cracking, and on the other side wasn't weakness, it was him. Her brother, breathing when he shouldn't be, haunted by secrets that made him a target. Harris shoved closer, his jaw clenched, his rifle steady despite the tremor in his voice. If we drag him, we die. If we leave him, we live. That's it. Elena's throat burned. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him blood isn't left behind, that she'd never forgive herself if she abandoned him again. But the child's small fingers dug into her vest, pulling her back to the present. She wasn't the only one who needed saving. Gunfire surged again, closer this time. Enemy boots hammered the stairwell, their shouts echoing in a language she half understood. The squad tightened formation, weapons snapping to every doorway. Elena pressed her forehead to her brother's briefly, her eyes wet though she hadn't cried in years. "Hold on," she whispered. "I'll find a way." He coughed blood, shaking his head faintly. "Don't waste them for me." The words cut deeper than bullets, because he was asking her to do what she couldn't. The stairwell exploded with motion. Shadows lunged through smoke, rifles barking. "Contact!" The squad unleashed hell. Muzzle flashes lit the room like lightning. The air turned to fire and thunder. Elena shifted the girl behind her, shouldering her rifle, firing until her magazine clicked empty. But even as she reloaded, she saw it, the way the enemy moved, not for the kill, for the grab. They wanted him alive. Her mind raced. She couldn't outgun them, couldn't outnumber them, but she could outthink them. "Smoke out," she shouted. A private obeyed without hesitation, popping 2 canisters. The room filled with thick gray clouds, burning their throats, stealing sight. Through the haze, she dragged her brother's weight against her side, muscles screaming. The girl stumbled beside her, clutching Elena's vest like a lifeline. Harris's voice tore through the comms. "Damn it, Vasquez, where are you taking him?" "To extraction," she snapped. "There is no extraction." She didn't answer, she couldn't. Because if she spoke, her voice would betray what she just decided. She wasn't leaving him. They staggered through the smoke, bullets whining past, plaster cracking above. Her brother's body was heavy, every step sinking her deeper into the floor, but she refused to let go. Behind them, Harris's curses filled the comms, laced with rage and something more fragile, fear. Fear that she'd just doomed them all. They broke into the stairwell, air clearer but no safer. Shadows swarmed below. More boots thundered above. They were trapped. Her brother's voice rasped against her ear. "Basement, tunnel." Her heart jolted. "What tunnel?" He coughed, lips trembling with the effort. "I mapped it months ago. It's still there." She stared at him, disbelief cutting through exhaustion. "And you didn't think to tell us sooner." He grimaced, didn't trust who'd be listening. Her hands shook. Rage burned hot in her chest, mixing with relief and desperation. She hated him for holding back. She loved him for giving her hope. "Where?" she demanded. He pointed weakly toward the far side of the stairwell. She kicked a door open, dragging him inside. A storage room, dark, damp, reeking of mold and rust. Broken shelves lined the walls. "Where?" she hissed again. He motioned toward the floor, toward a sheet of cracked metal half hidden under debris. Harris and 2 others stormed in behind her, slamming the door shut against the enemy outside. "What the hell is this?" Harris snarled. Elena dropped to her knees, scraping debris aside with raw hands. The metal cover shifted, groaning. Beneath it, a black hole gaped into the earth. "A tunnel." Harris's eyes widened with disbelief and fury. "You knew about this." "Not until now," she shot back. His glare said he didn't believe her. The pounding outside grew louder. Fists, boots, rifle butts smashing the door. "We don't have time for this," Harris snapped. "We leave him, we take the tunnel." Elena's chest burned. Her brother's hand gripped hers weakly, eyes pleading. "I can move," he rasped. It was a lie, but she nodded anyway. "Then we move together." Harris blocked her path, his jaw set like iron. "You're compromising the mission. Every life here is worth more than one broken soldier." Her voice cracked, but her stare didn't. He's not just one soldier. The pounding at the door splintered wood. Harris raised his rifle, not at the enemy, at her brother. Her breath stopped. "Step aside, Vasquez," Harris said. His voice was steady, cold, the voice of a man who'd already made his choice. Time fractured. The pounding slowed. The girl's breath stilled. Even the enemy's shouts outside faded into a dull roar. It was just her, Harris, and the rifle pointed at the man she'd thought dead. She had seconds to decide. Her brother's life. The squad's survival. The mission's integrity. Every oath she'd sworn, every scar she carried, every doubt whispered about her in every barracks, it all condensed into this one impossible moment. Her hand hovered near her weapon, her pulse thundered in her ears. She looked Harris in the eyes, and for the first time saw not just command, not just discipline, but the terror of a man who couldn't see another way out. She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. There has to be another way. The door burst inward, enemy shadows flooded the room. And the decision was ripped from her hands. Why did the night feel heavier than the one before? The city lights were gone, swallowed by blackout. The only glow came from the distant embers of burned-out buildings, flickering against a sky smothered by smoke. She sat on the cracked concrete floor of the safe house, rifle across her knees, trying to quiet the hum inside her chest. Sleep wouldn't come. It rarely did, not when silence could mean safety or death. The men had gone quiet hours ago. Even the ones who usually cracked jokes before bed had withdrawn into themselves. War did that. It carved out the words you wanted to say and left them unspoken, like ghosts in your throat. She knew what they were thinking but wouldn't admit. Too many missions had gone sideways. Too many friends had disappeared. And tomorrow was the kind of operation that left scars on those who survived. She checked her scope again, even though she'd done it twice already. The glass was clean, the adjustments precise, each movement deliberate, practiced. But beneath the rhythm of preparation, something gnawed at her, not fear of the enemy. She had faced worse, lived through worse. What unsettled her was the weight of her own promise, the one she had made years ago in a hospital room thick with antiseptic and tears. Her brother's face haunted her, his voice faint but steady. "Don't let them forget us." He had been just another casualty, another number in the long ledger of war. And she had chosen this path not for glory, not for medals, but to make sure his story, their story, wasn't erased. That meant standing where others doubted she could stand. That meant carrying the unbearable until it broke her, or proved her stronger than they imagined. A faint sound snapped her back, boots on gravel approaching the safe house. She gripped her rifle, body tense, breath caught in her chest. A shadow passed the doorway. Then another. Friend or foe? The squad leader raised a hand, a signal from the darkness. Allies. She lowered the barrel, exhaling the breath she hadn't realized she held. They entered quietly, mud and sweat marking their uniforms. One of them dropped a pack on the floor, the sound louder than it should have been. She watched his shoulders slumped heavy. Something had gone wrong. "2 men lost," the leader said flatly, avoiding eyes. "Ambush on the southern road, we move at dawn." No one spoke. The silence was suffocating. She wanted to ask names, but sometimes names hurt worse than silence. One of the younger soldiers, barely 20, freckles still visible beneath the grime, sat down across from her. He fumbled with his canteen, hands trembling. Do you think any of us make it out?" he asked, his voice fragile, breaking the silence like glass. She looked at him, at his boyish fear hidden behind forced composure. She could have lied, could have offered the kind of false comfort that tastes sweet for a moment before bitterness sets in. But instead, she gave him the only truth she believed in. "Not all of us, but enough to make it matter." He held her gaze, and for a moment she saw steadiness return to him. Not confidence, not certainty, but something real. Later, as the others drifted into uneasy sleep, she remained awake. The hum inside her chest hadn't quieted. She pulled a worn photograph from her pocket, creased edges, faded colors. Her brother, smiling in uniform, sunlight caught in his hair. She let herself look at it only in the darkest hours, only when no one could see the cracks in her armor. A sudden crack echoed outside, not close but not far either. A rifle shot, then silence again. Her hand went instinctively to her weapon, though she didn't rise. The squad leader shifted in his sleep but didn't wake. The young soldier beside her stirred, whispered, "Was that?" "Yes," she said softly, eyes fixed on the black window, "but it wasn't meant for us, not yet." He didn't ask more. She didn't explain. Some truths were better left unspoken until the moment demanded them. The hours dragged. Shadows stretched, shifted, dissolved into the faint gray of dawn. The squad assembled silently, faces pale but resolved. She moved with them, not above, not below, but as one. Her presence no longer dismissed, no longer questioned, not openly. But she could still feel their doubts, carried like invisible weight. As they approached the staging ground, the leader pulled her aside, his expression unreadable. "You'll cover us from the east ridge, highest point. If this goes wrong, we'll need your eyes, your fire." It wasn't quite trust, it was necessity, but sometimes necessity was enough. She nodded, words weren't needed. They moved out. The city loomed, scarred and broken, yet alive in its defiance. Rubble-strewn streets, shattered glass crunching under boots, air heavy with the metallic tang of smoke. Every step forward pressed her deeper into the unspoken truth. Not all of them would walk back. From the ridge, she watched them spread out below, shadows against ruins, small figures carrying the weight of something larger than themselves. Her scope found each of them, traced their movements, memorized their faces. If the world forgot them, she would not. But then through the crosshairs she saw movement. Not her men, not allies. Shapes in the rubble waiting, watching. Too many, far too many. Her stomach turned to ice. She reached for the radio, whispering, urgent, "You're walking into it, pull back now." Static, then a voice calm, resigned, the leader. "We can't, the objective's inside, buy us the time." Her finger tightened on the trigger, heart pounding, lungs burning. She had asked herself once if courage meant not being afraid. Now she knew better. Courage meant this, feeling the fear claw at you and stepping forward anyway. Through the scope, she saw the first enemy raise his rifle. She exhaled, squeezed, and the world cracked open with the sound of her shot. And the battle began. What did it mean to carry lives on the tip of your finger? She asked herself that as she steadied her breath, one eye pressed to the scope, the other shut against the rising smoke of battle. Each pull of the trigger was a decision, a man standing then falling, the difference between her squad's survival and their destruction. She didn't see enemies anymore, not really, just movement, shadows. The rhythm of war played through her pulse, cold and relentless. Below, chaos unfolded. Her squad advanced through the broken skeleton of the city, darting from cover to cover, each second stretched thin. The air was thick with dust, shouts, the sharp bark of gunfire echoing against collapsed walls. She marked targets, cleared their path, keeping them alive one shot at a time. Yet with every impact, a piece of her quiet humanity seemed to chip away. The young soldier, the freckled one from the night before, was in her scope for a heartbeat, crouched low behind a shattered car, his weapon shaking as he reloaded. He looked up, scanning the horizon, and for a moment she saw his fear as clearly as if he were inches away. He wasn't ready for this, not really, but none of them ever were. She whispered into the radio, steady, controlled. "Left flank. Window, third story." He followed her voice like a lifeline. The shot she fired dropped the enemy who had him lined up. He flinched, glanced toward her ridge, though he couldn't see her. Still, she knew he felt it, the invisible shield she tried to be. But the shield was cracking. More figures emerged from the ruins, too many. She shifted, firing again, each motion practiced yet draining. Sweat stung her eyes, breath ragged. A cold realization gnawed at her gut. She couldn't hold them all back. Not forever. The radio crackled, the squad leader's voice clipped urgent. "We're inside, East Corridor. Enemy dug in deep. We need more time." Time, that was what they always needed, and she could give it, but at a cost. Her hands trembled briefly. She forced them still. Every second she bought for them was another second she lost from herself. Suddenly, an explosion ripped through the street below, an IED buried and waiting. Concrete shards flew like shrapnel, dust swallowing the figures. For a terrifying moment she couldn't see them, couldn't hear them, only the roaring silence of her own pulse. Then through the haze movement, the young soldier again dragging another man whose leg was twisted unnaturally. He wasn't fast enough. Enemies closed in from the alleys. She adjusted, fired, missed the first time, curse catching in her throat, adjusted again, hit. The man dragging his comrade kept moving, face pale with grit and terror. She whispered to no one but herself, "Keep going, just keep going." And still something wasn't right. Through the scope, she caught sight of a figure on the rooftop opposite her ridge. Calm, still, the unmistakable shape of another sniper. Her heart stopped. He had the angle not on her but on them, on the squad below. She shifted instantly, barrel swinging. But he was good, already aiming. The distance was long, too long to guarantee. She exhaled, felt her body tremble against the stone beneath her. This was it, the moment between failure and survival. Her finger curled, a shot cracked, she didn't know whose came first. For a breathless eternity nothing moved. Then the figure on the rooftop staggered, dropped. Relief crashed through her, hot and dizzying, but it was short-lived. The enemy round had still fired. And it had found someone. Down below, one of her squad, Martinez, the one with the rough laugh and tired eyes, collapsed. The young soldier knelt beside him, screaming something she couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears. She shut her eyes, throat tight. Martinez had been telling her the night before about the house he wanted to build back home. Somewhere with a porch, he'd said. Somewhere quiet. Now that dream lay bleeding into the dust. She couldn't cry, couldn't scream. All she could do was pull the scope back to her eye and keep firing, because the living still needed her more than the dead. The radio broke through, harsh and desperate. "Target secured. Extraction point north. Cover us now." Her body moved on instinct, barrel swinging, breath measured, trigger pulling. The squad broke from the building, carrying both the living and the fallen. She painted their escape path with bullets, keeping shadows at bay. Her hands ached, muscles screaming, but she didn't stop. Not until the last of them disappeared into the smoke. Then silence. Her ears rang with it. The ridge felt suddenly too high, too exposed. Her breath came shallow, uneven. She forced herself to rise, rifle slung across her back. Her knees trembled. Her chest was hollow. When she finally regrouped with them at the extraction point, their faces told the story without words. Dust-streaked, eyes wide, some alive, some barely, and the empty space where Martinez should have been. The leader's gaze met hers. He gave a single nod, respect or gratitude or something heavier. But it didn't feel like victory, not when she could still hear the echo of Martinez's voice talking about porches and quiet places. That night in another safe house miles away, she sat alone in the corner. The photograph of her brother lay in her palm. She stared at it, then at the dirt-streaked faces of the survivors around her. And she wondered, how many more photographs would be folded into trembling hands before this was done? The young soldier approached, eyes red, jaw clenched. He sat without asking, silence stretching between them. Finally, he whispered, "You saved me, more than once." She didn't answer. Words weren't enough. She only placed the photograph back into her pocket, her promise burning inside her chest. And for the first time he saw it, the cracks in her armor. The cost she carried so quietly, so fiercely. "Do you want me to continue with part 7 at the same length and tone?" How many lives could one person carry before they broke? The question gnawed at her as she stared at the dirt-caked floor of the safe house, listening to the uneven rhythm of breathing around her. The squad slept in fragments, head against wall, rifles within arm's reach, dreams twisted by exhaustion and grief. Only she stayed awake, eyes fixed on the faint glow of dawn bleeding through the broken shutters. Martinez's absence sat like a ghost among them. No one spoke his name, but his presence was everywhere, in the silence before someone laughed, in the space left empty when meals were handed out. She felt it most sharply in the quiet moments between battle and movement, when the war seemed to stop just long enough for grief to creep in. She tried to steady her hands by cleaning her rifle, piece by piece, motion by motion, but the tremor stayed, subtle, betraying her. Every trigger pull had left a mark, invisible but heavy. She wasn't sure how many more she could carry. The squad leader finally stirred, his face carved by shadows. He crossed the room, crouched beside her. For a moment neither spoke. Then he said, low and rough, "We've got orders. One last push. After that, maybe we get to go home." Home, the word tasted strange. Foreign, she couldn't remember what it felt like. Did she even have one anymore, or had war swallowed that too? But something in his voice, a rare softness, a quiet plea, made her lift her gaze. "What's the objective?" He hesitated, as though weighing how much to tell her. Finally, "Command says the cell leaders hold up across the river. If we take him out, it cripples their network here. We end this." She nodded, though the knot in her chest tightened. Missions that promised endings rarely delivered them. War didn't end with one man falling, but the men around her needed to believe it could. Maybe she did too. They moved at dusk. The river cut through the city like a scar, its waters dark and sluggish, carrying the stench of decay. The squad crossed in silence, boots sinking into mud, each step echoing too loud in her mind. On the far bank, ruins loomed, broken walls, collapsed roofs, a world frozen in destruction. She took her position high again, overlooking the approach. The others moved in shadows, their shapes merging with the wreckage. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then a sound, faint, deliberate, a voice over her earpiece one she didn't recognize, low, mocking, "We've been waiting." Her blood ran cold. The channel was compromised. The ambush erupted like lightning. Gunfire cracked from hidden angles, muzzle flashes sparking from windows, rooftops, doorways. Her squad scattered for cover, shouts cutting through the chaos. She swung her rifle, firing fast, precise, but they were everywhere. Through the scope she caught sight of a figure in the distance, not just another fighter, calm, directing, watching, the cell leader. Her breath hitched. This was the moment, the one they'd been sent for. If she could take the shot, end it here. But her squad was pinned. The young soldier was exposed, back against a wall too thin to hold against the fire tearing through it. She saw his mouth moving, shouting for help, though the words drowned in gunfire. Her finger hovered over the trigger, torn between two choices: end the mission or save her people. She could hear her brother's voice again, faint but steady. "Don't let them forget us." If she took the shot, history might remember the victory. But if she let him die, who would carry his story? Who would remember the freckles, the fear, the fragile courage? She made her choice. The rifle cracked, not toward the leader, but toward the shooters cornering her squad. One down, another, a gap opening just wide enough for them to move. She shouted into the radio, voice sharp, commanding, "Push left, go." They followed, breaking from cover, surging through the breach she carved with every round. The leader cursed, ducked back into shadow, slipping away. She felt the loss like a knife twisting in her gut, but her squad lived. For now, that was enough. When it was over, the street was littered with bodies, the silence broken only by the crackle of fire consuming the ruins. The young soldier sat against the wall, chest heaving, eyes wide. He looked at her through the haze, his expression raw with something between gratitude and disbelief. "You could have ended it," he whispered when she finally reached him. Why didn't you?" She didn't answer at first. The truth was too heavy, too fragile. Finally, she said, quiet but steady, "Because endings mean nothing if no one lives to see them." His eyes filled, not with tears but with something harder, understanding. That night, as they regrouped in the shadows of the ruined city, she sat alone again, her rifle across her knees. She replayed the moment in her mind, the choice she had made. The cell leader was still out there, the mission incomplete. Command would call it failure. But as she looked at the faces of those still breathing because of her, she wondered if maybe courage wasn't measured in victories or kills. Maybe it was in choosing who lived to carry the story forward. The war wasn't over. It might never be. But she had carved something into the silence, something no one could take away. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe. Maybe that was enough. What do you leave behind when the world refuses to remember? The question drifted through her mind as she sat on the battered transport, the engine growling beneath her boots. Dawn pressed against the horizon, painting the sky with a pale fire that seemed too gentle for what they carried inside. The squad was silent, each man lost to his own thoughts. Bandages stained with rust-colored blood, eyes that refused to meet hers. The absence of Martinez still a shadow in every corner. She sat near the open door, rifle balanced across her lap, the wind cold against her face. From this high ridge, the city stretched below like a graveyard of steel and stone. Somewhere in that labyrinth, the cell leader still breathed, still planned, still spread ruin. Command would call the mission unfinished. They would say she had failed. But when her gaze swept the faces beside her, the young soldier still alive, the squad leader worn but steady, the others scarred yet breathing, she felt the flicker of something she hadn't dared allow herself in years. Maybe it wasn't failure at all. The transport jolted to a halt near the extraction zone, dust spiraling in the morning light. They unloaded in silence, boots sinking into the soft earth of a field long abandoned. For a brief moment, it almost looked like peace. Grass pushing stubbornly through cracks in the soil, birds cutting across the empty sky. But peace wasn't theirs to claim, not yet. The squad leader pulled her aside, his voice low. Command wants a debrief. They'll want to know why he's still out there. His eyes flickered, heavy with unspoken weight. They won't understand. She looked at him, her silence steady. She didn't care if they understood. They weren't the ones dragging bodies from fire, whispering promises to the dying, carrying names like stones in their chest. They weren't the ones who had to decide whose story continued and whose ended. The others gathered near the field's edge. The young soldier lingered, watching her. He wanted to speak. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, then loosened. Finally, he stepped closer. I thought courage was not being afraid, he said, voice thin but earnest. But you were afraid, I saw it, and you didn't stop. She almost smiled, though it came out as something smaller, sadder. Fear keeps you alive, she said softly. It reminds you what's worth protecting. He nodded, absorbing her words like they might anchor him to something solid. And in his eyes, she saw a reflection of herself years ago, before the war had carved her into silence. The squad boarded again, the engine roaring to life. As the field faded behind them, so did the illusion of peace. The road ahead was rough, broken, leading deeper into the unknown. She knew the fight wasn't over. It might never be. The cell leader would rise again, someone else would take his place, and the war would keep demanding more. But she also knew this. History wasn't carved by victories alone. Sometimes it was carved by the quiet, unseen choices, by the moments where one life was spared and in that life, countless futures hidden. Night fell by the time they reached the larger base. Floodlights cut across the perimeter, soldiers moving like shadows, trucks rumbling, radios spitting static. Life went on even here, where death was constant. Inside the debriefing room, she stood silent as the leader spoke for them. Reports were written, losses recorded, objectives weighed and judged. Her name was barely mentioned, her part blurred into the margins. Some things never changed. But as they left, the young soldier lingered in the doorway. He straightened, raised his hand, not in casual respect but in a salute. His eyes didn't waver. And in that simple gesture she felt something settle inside her. Not triumph, Not pride, something quieter, recognition. Later, she found herself alone again, sitting under the cold wash of moonlight. The photograph of her brother rested in her hand, the creases deeper now from years of being folded, unfolded, held in moments of doubt. She traced his smile with her thumb, and for the first time whispered words aloud. "I kept my promise." The wind carried her voice into the night, soft, almost fragile, but it was enough, because courage wasn't always loud. It wasn't always seen. Sometimes it was the silence that spoke loudest. The steady hands, the unbroken watch, the choices that carved dignity into history without demanding recognition. She closed her eyes, the sound of distant gunfire echoing like memory, like heartbeat. Tomorrow would bring more battles, more names, more choices, but tonight in the quiet she allowed herself to breathe. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And in that silence it carves a place in history, beyond any doubt.